Hey guys, tonight we step into the job that almost no medieval person wanted, yet someone had to do, usually you. You're moving through a pre-dawn chill, breath fogging as you wander toward the edges of town, and you already know the smell will reach you before the sun does. You're about to start your shift as a gong farmer, yes, the human being responsible for climbing down into cesspits and dragging out what everyone else preferred never to think about. And as you stand there, boots on, wondering why your life choices led you here, you probably won't survive this, at least not with your dignity intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing the little map we all make together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin the morning by trudging through narrow medieval streets where refuse drains toward the centre, like some kind of collaborative community prank. The town is quiet except for the creak of shutters and the distant clatter of a baker warming his oven. Your tools, long-handled scoops, buckets, a rope, and the faint hope of survival are slung across your back as you approach your destination, a private household with a cesspit that hasn't been emptied since, well, judging by the smell, sometime during the Crusades. Gong farming was dangerous, though not for the reasons modern people expect. Sure, it was disgusting, but the real threat came from toxic fumes trapped in the pit. Ammonia and methane lingered like invisible snakes, and more than one gong farmer passed out, fell forward, and became an unfortunate footnote in city records. Historians still argue whether medieval towns knew the exact chemical risks or simply assumed, the pit eats people sometimes. Nature, you know. You arrive at the wooden hatch covering the cesspit. It's swollen from moisture and age, and when you pry it up, a wave of warm air rushes out with the enthusiasm of a dragon exhaling. You try not to gag, you fail a little, and then you lower yourself down the rope, boots sliding across slimy stone. Your eyes adjust slowly to the near darkness, and your breath shortens as the air thickens. Welcome to your office. Standing ankle deep, you begin scooping, the bucket filling with, well, you can imagine. One joke every 300 words is probably required by law, so here's the allowably gentle one. Medieval townsfolk did not mess around with fibre. Everything in this pit is compact enough to qualify as early concrete. At least that's what you tell yourself, so you can pretend your work contributes to city infrastructure. A mainstream fact woven gently into your misery. Gong farmers were often paid surprisingly well. Not retire to a villa, well, but enough that some men took pride in the job. And because few people wanted to do it, you faced very little competition. Kind of like being the only person in town willing to clean everyone else's browser history. You haul up the first heavy bucket using the rope. Someone above empties it into a waiting cart. The contents destined for fields outside the town where farmers use it as fertilizer. Yes, your work helps grow the food that keeps the community alive. The circle of life is beautiful if you squint hard enough and try not to breathe. Down in the pit, a fringe historical tidbit becomes your bitter companion. Some medieval people believed evil spirits lurked in cesspits, especially at night. Not metaphorical spirits, actual supernatural creatures believed to thrive in filth. So if you ever wondered whether your job is bad because of bodily waste or because demons hang out 3 feet from your boots, the answer is yes. You shift your weight to reach deeper into the corner, and the mud, let's call it mud, shifts beneath you. The walls of the pit feel closer than a polite workplace should allow. Somewhere above, a passerby walks past without knowing a fully grown adult is currently in a hole beneath them, doing a job that would traumatize a modern HR department. As you scoop another load, you think about the peculiar social status of your profession. You're essential but avoided, needed but invisible. Everyone wants you to do your job, but no one wants to talk to you about it. Children might stare at you from a distance, and adults make sure to stand upwind if you join a conversation. If someone throws a feast, they might invite half the town and still omit you, though to be fair, inviting you indoors after work would violate several articles of human decency. The pit is nearly cleared now, and your shoulders ache from hauling weight the texture of overcooked porridge. A fresh breeze leaks through the wooden hatch, and for a moment, you imagine what it must be like to have a job above ground. A scholar maybe, a scribe copying manuscripts, a falconer wearing a cool leather glove, A minstrel charming coins from crowds. Anything where your daily equipment isn't measured in buckets. You climb up the rope, legs trembling. When you reach the surface, you gasp like someone emerging from underwater. The air isn't exactly fresh, but compared with the cesspit, it may as well be alpine mountain wind. As you clean your tools, you hear villagers talking about dinner plans, festivals, church bells, and gossip. You feel both part of their world and somehow separate from it. A paradox shared by many medieval labourers who did work so unpleasant that society pretended not to see them. And yet, without you, life here collapses in a matter of weeks. Streets would flood with filth, water would become contaminated, and diseases would spread faster than a rumour about the king's cousin's scandalous haircut. Historians still debate whether gong farmers had fixed schedules or were called only when pits overflowed. But either way, your day often begins before sunrise and ends long after everyone else has gone to bed. You finish loading the last bucket onto the cart and take a moment to breathe. The morning sun finally warms the rooftops. People begin emerging from their homes, unaware that while they slept, you descended into the worst job imaginable and returned victorious. Your shift is done, for now. But as you walk away, someone flags you down with an apologetic look. Their cesspit is full. Of course it is. You don't get much rest before the next job drags you into a different kind of nightmare. This time, one that squelches, and clings, and wiggles, because now you're headed out to the marshes as a leech collector, which sounds like something out of a medieval prank show, but was, unfortunately, very real. You make your way down a muddy track toward the wetlands just outside town, the air already damp enough to make your clothes cling to your skin. A thin mist curls over the reeds, and every step you take sinks slightly, as if the earth itself is reconsidering its life choices. Leech collecting wasn't a side hustle, it was a serious medical supply chain. In an era when bloodletting was practically a cure-all, physicians demanded leeches the way modern doctors demand gloves, and you, lucky you, are the one who provides them. A mainstream fact to ease you into the misery. Some medieval cities imported thousands upon thousands of leeches across entire kingdoms just to meet the demand. You're not just in the medical field, you are the medical field. Honestly, go ahead and put that on your medieval resume. You reach the edge of the marsh, and the water is still, dark and suspiciously reflective. You know the rules: step in, stand still, and wait for the leeches to find you. There's an art to this job, apparently. You can't splash too much or they'll spook. You can't move too little or they'll assume you're an especially uninteresting tree stump. So you take a deep breath, wading in until the cold water climbs up to your knees, and then you stay. It doesn't take long. At first, it's just the faintest tickle, like a tiny thread brushing your skin. You tell yourself it's fine, harmless. Could be a leaf drifting by. And then another tickle, and another. It's only when you look down through the murky water that you catch the shadowy shapes gliding toward you with unsettling enthusiasm. Congratulations, you're the buffet. The leeches latch onto your legs in slow-motion confidence, and each one begins drinking like you've just opened a midnight tavern. Collectors in later centuries sometimes used animals instead of themselves, but in medieval Europe most leech gathering was still very much a bring-your-own-limbs operation. Historians still argue whether this was due to tradition, superstition, or simply the fact that goats charge consulting fees. As more leeches attach themselves, you suppress the urge to flinch. Supposedly, the less you panic, the better. That's what the old collectors say anyway, usually while you're already ankle-deep in disappointment. And here's your fringe fact for the day. Some leech collectors believed humming softly calmed the creatures, making them easier to pull off intact. It's part superstition, part coping mechanism, and part nobody can stop you from singing in a swamp. You feel one of the larger leeches crawling just a bit too far up your thigh, and suddenly you reconsider every major decision you've made this week. The marsh around you ripples with small movements, frogs plopping into the water, birds skimming overhead, insects buzzing like winged alarm clocks. Everything is alive here. Very alive. Maybe too alive. You begin removing the first batch, plucking each leech carefully and dropping it into a small wooden bucket with a perforated lid. The bucket shivers as they wriggle inside, making your stomach tighten with equal parts triumph and regret. You need dozens, maybe hundreds, depending on the local physician's demand. A small town with a bad harvest or a wave of fevers could easily burn through your entire supply in a few days. And while you work, You can't help but picture how these leeches will be used, applied to swollen joints, fevers, infections, and even headaches. People in medieval Europe trusted them for nearly everything, except maybe marriage counselling. Though if someone suggested sticking a leech on your spouse to improve communication, you suspect at least one medieval couple would have tried it. Your legs sting a bit where the leeches were, and thin trickles of blood slide down as you step deeper into the marsh. That's normal. Annoying, but normal. The real danger comes from infection, or from slipping into deeper water where leeches grow big enough to unionize. And of course, there's always the chance of stepping on something that isn't mud, a log, a snake, a frog having an existential crisis. You brace yourself with a long stick while you move further down the bank, in search of a fresh patch of leech-infested water. As you continue, you think about how oddly peaceful this place is. The mist drifts lazily, the cattails sway, a heron lifts off in slow motion like a medieval screensaver. If you weren't currently losing small quantities of blood to aquatic vampires, this could be almost relaxing. Another handful of leeches goes into the bucket. You hum a little, partly out of superstition, partly because it distracts you from the fact that a creature the size of your thumb just tried to climb behind your knee. Medieval life teaches you that discomfort is temporary, but a full bucket means food on the table. Some collectors even became local specialists, passing down the job through families. Imagine being 5 years old and hearing, "One day, son, all this marsh will be yours." Inspirational, in a muddy kind of way. By the time the sun climbs higher, your legs have grown numb from the cold and your bucket shudders with movement. Your clothes are damp, your hands smell faintly of river muck, and a few persistent leeches are still hanging on like customers who won't leave a store at closing time. You peel them off one by one and seal the bucket with a wooden peg. When you finally step out of the marsh, you feel heavier, not physically, just existentially. You look back and watch the ripples settle, the reeds swaying in a gentle breeze. This place demands a price from you, always, but it also provides. You've gathered enough leeches to satisfy the town physician for days, maybe weeks if people behave themselves and don't try to treat every sneeze with just one more leech. You walk back toward town, legs tingling, buckets sloshing with life, and you know this is only one of many strange and terrible jobs waiting for you in this world. And honestly, compared to what's coming later, this might have been the easy shift. You barely have time to scrape the last bit of swamp grit from your ankles before you're swept into yet another profession that medieval people accepted with suspiciously little complaint. Fulling. Specifically, you're stepping into the life of a medieval fuller, a person whose entire job revolves around stomping woolcloth inside vats filled with liquid that, well, let's just say it was sourced locally and created naturally. And yes, unfortunately, it's exactly the liquid you think it is. You make your way toward the fulling workshop, following the smell long before you see the building. The air carries a sting that curls your nose hairs. It's sharp, sour, unmistakable. The workshop sits beside a running stream because water is essential for the job, and also because medieval zoning laws basically amounted to put the smelly stuff near the water and hope the river deals with it. Inside, wide wooden vats the size of bathtubs sit lined up in rows, each filled with warm water mixed with stale urine, politely known as chamber lye. And here's your mainstream historical fact for the section. Medieval fullers deliberately collected household urine as a cleaning agent. It contains ammonia, which breaks down grease in wool. Yes, the same chemical used in some modern cleaning products. You're not wrong to feel betrayed by this information. You roll up your trousers, trying to muster the emotional strength of a person who's about to willingly step into a vat of community contributions. Your co-workers barely glance your way. They're already knee-deep in the stuff, rhythmically stomping in slow, squishy unison. You take a deep breath, trying to pretend you're entering the ocean on a warm day, and then you step into the vat. It is warm. It is too warm, and it squishes in a way no liquid should squish. You fight the urge to scream a little. This must be what emotional, character development feels like. You begin stomping, pushing your weight down on the folded lengths of woolcloth beneath the surface. The movement is repetitive, almost hypnotic. Step, press, shift, step, press, shift. The sour scent of ammonia hits your throat every time you exhale, so you quickly learn to breathe shallowly. Around you, the wooden rafters drip condensation from the steam rising off the vats. You tell yourself it's steam. You refuse to consider alternatives. Fulling wasn't just gross, it was necessary. Untreated wool is greasy, smelly, and clumped with natural oils like lanolin. Fulling cleans the fibres, tightens the weave, and transforms the cloth into something people actually want to wear. In a weird, profoundly unfortunate way. You're improving medieval fashion. After a few minutes, your legs grow used to the rhythm, and your brain drifts. You imagine the finished cloth becoming a tunic or a cloak, or maybe a monk's robe. Maybe it will clothe a noble. Maybe it'll end up as someone's tablecloth. Maybe someone will spill their ale on it and complain about how hard it is to wash, completely unaware that it was pre-washed in the worst way imaginable. You stomp faster. Your co-worker to the left hums tunelessly. Another spits into the vat for good luck, which, historically speaking, is both gross and absolutely something people did. And just for your fringe fact, some fullers in ancient cultures even used special designated urine collectors who went door to door requesting contributions. Imagine answering the door to that. Around midday, the workshop master calls for a break. You step out of the vat, legs dripping, feet wrinkled like over-soaked prunes. You rinse off in the cold stream, which only kind of helps. The smell is now permanently part of your soul. You can pick it up through walls. Historians still argue whether fullers were socially avoided as much as gong farmers, but one thing is clear. Nobody sat next to them at church unless they absolutely had to. You sit on a wooden bench, stretching your legs. A few apprentices bring fresh lengths of wool to be processed next. The cloth looks soft and innocent, almost fluffy. You glare at it. It has no idea what's coming. Back in the vats, the work grows more intense. This next batch of wool is thicker, and you have to stomp harder, pushing the cloth down with your heels. Your feet slip occasionally on the slick wood beneath the liquid, forcing you to grab the vat's rim for balance. The others laugh, good-naturedly but still. You mutter something that would have been a mild swear word in the 1200s. Some workshops used water-powered fulling hammers, massive wooden mallets that pounded the wool mechanically. These were marvels of engineering loud enough to shake entire neighbourhoods. But in smaller towns like this, it's still all footwork, all human effort, and all olfactory suffering. You keep stomping as afternoon light slants through the workshop windows, turning the rising steam into a hazy glow. It's strangely beautiful, like a dream sequence filmed in the world's worst-smelling sauna. Your legs ache, but in a grounded, satisfying way. This job, for all its horrors, is steady, reliable, essential. And here's the odd truth. Fullers could make decent money. Not rich, but respectable. Enough to survive. Enough to put food on the table. Enough to buy a new pair of shoes after your old ones dissolve from repeated exposure to, well, you know. Finally, as evening approaches, you finish the final batch. The wool is rinsed, stretched on wooden racks, and left to dry in the cool night air. You wash your legs again in the stream, twice for emotional reasons. Then you head home, clothes still carrying the faint aroma of your profession. People step aside as you walk past. Not rudely, just instinctively. But somewhere, in a field or a workshop or a tailor's shop, someone will thank you silently when they pull on a warm, clean cloak. Your work might be disgusting, but it changes things, creates things, makes life better, bit by bit. And if anyone complains about the smell, well, they're welcome to try the job themselves. You wake the next morning wishing your legs didn't feel like overcooked noodles, but medieval life does not care about your muscle recovery. Today, you're not knee-deep in a marsh or stomping cloth in questionable liquids. No, your next job has a different kind of discomfort. Less squishy, more spooky. Because now you're working as a plague watcher, a role that requires equal parts vigilance, courage, and a strong ability to pretend you didn't just hear something unsettling coming from inside a locked house. The air feels heavy as you walk through town, one of those mornings where the breeze carries a faint bitterness from the previous day's fires. Outside certain houses, a red or black mark has been painted on the door. It's not decorative, it's a warning. Inside those homes, someone has fallen sick, and your job is to watch the house to make sure no one leaves or sneaks in. No pressure. You arrive at the first marked house, settling onto a wooden stool under the eaves. The door is shut, barred from the outside by local officials. Your job is to ensure it stays that way. You are the human lock, the medieval security system with no off switch and questionable user benefits. But here's the mainstream historical fact you need for today. In many towns, plague watchers were hired during outbreaks to enforce quarantines. Sometimes they were paid fairly. Sometimes they weren't paid at all and volunteered in the same way people volunteer to hold the creepy doll in a horror movie. You adjust your cloak and settle in. The street is quiet. Too quiet, honestly. Every sound is amplified. The chirp of a sparrow, the crack of a shutter, the distant chatter of someone sweeping their stoop far down the lane. And then, inevitably, the soft cough from inside the house. Your stomach tightens. You're close enough to hear them but not close enough to help. That's the job. You keep the sickness contained. In a world without modern medicine, quarantining a house was one of the few tools people believed might slow the spread. Historians still argue whether these lockdowns were effective or simply fear-driven attempts at control. But standing here, in the hush of a street that seems to be holding its breath, you feel the weight of responsibility in your own. You check the seals again, a rope tied through iron loops on the door, wax marks pressed over the knots, all intact. Good. You sit back down. A cat slinks by, eyeing you suspiciously. You eye it back. You both know it is plotting mischief. Hours pass. You listen for voices, for movement, for anything that might signal someone inside is getting desperate. During severe outbreaks, people sometimes tried to bribe plague watchers to let them out. Others tried slipping through windows or crawling onto roofs. It makes you hyper-aware of every creak from above, and because every section needs one joke, you begin noticing that the cat is the only coworker you've had in days who hasn't tried to escape the building. A win, technically. Around midday, a runner approaches carrying a small basket. He sets it on the ground several paces from you, stepping back quickly. Inside are supplies: bread, dried peas, a wedge of cheese, and a skin of ale. These are meant for the family inside the house. You're required to pass them in without letting the occupants slip out. You knock on the door without getting too close. A moment later, you hear shuffling. The door cracks open just enough for a hand to reach out. Pale fingers, thin, trembling. You slide the basket forward with a stick, stepping back. The hand snatches it and vanishes into the dark. The door shuts. You reseal the rope, and you sit again. Plague watchers weren't always beloved. Some people saw them as protectors, others saw them as jailers, and some believed they were bribed to overlook violations. There's even a fringe historical tidbit claiming that in a few towns, watchers were forbidden from drinking on duty because the temptation to accept bribes in exchange for a friendly distraction was too strong. Which honestly implies that some watchers were treating the job like a medieval nightclub bouncer. The hours drag on, and you shift uncomfortably. The stool is unforgiving. The sun bakes your cloak. But the sounds inside the house grow quieter. Too quiet. You try not to think about what that means. As evening darkens the street, another watcher arrives to relieve you. You exchange a tired nod. There's no small talk. No using the phrase, "How was your shift?" because no good answer exists. You walk to your next post. This house is quieter, but the windows are sealed with cloth soaked in vinegar, the medieval equivalent of an air purifier. The family inside might be stable, they might be worsening, you simply don't know. Night settles in, and with it comes the eerie stillness that always follows fear. You trace patterns in the dirt with your boot, listening to the distant toll of the church bell. A dog barks once, stops, then whines. A soft thump comes from inside the house. You sit up straight. A second thump, then nothing. Historians still debate how emotionally taxing this job was, but you have no doubt. You're the first line of defence and the last line of support, and all from a stool 2 feet from a door you never enter. You stay the entire night, keeping your thoughts slow and your breath steady. Your eyes adjust to the dim lamp glow. Occasionally you hear movement inside, maybe shifting, maybe pacing. You remind yourself that your presence matters, that the job protects the town, that in a world without clear answers, simply sitting here is a kind of bravery. And when dawn finally arrives, you stand and stretch, legs stiff, cloak lightly damp with dew. Another watcher takes your place. You nod again, always just the nod. You walk away quietly, leaving the house sealed behind you, hoping the people inside make it through the day. Because today, you're off to your next terrible job. And surprisingly, there are far worse to come. You barely shake off the chill of that long night before duty yanks you somewhere darker, morally darker, socially darker, and frankly, I can't believe this is my job. Darker. Because now you're stepping into the uneasy boots of a medieval executioner, the person everyone needs, everyone fears, and everyone pretends not to make eye contact with at the market. It's early morning, the kind of grey, washed-out light that makes the world look like it forgot to wake up properly. You walk through the town square with a hood pulled low, carrying tools wrapped in cloth. Tools that no one wants to see, but everyone knows are there. People part around you like you're a moving column of bad luck. A child glances your way, then immediately hides behind his mother. She whispers, "Don't stare." She means it kindly, or maybe she means it fearfully. Hard to tell. Here's your mainstream historical fact to get us warmed up. Executioners weren't just headsmen. They handled amputations, interrogations, branding, and, oddly, some medical procedures, since they understood anatomy better than most townsfolk. Because nothing says trustworthy healthcare provider like the person who also sharpens the axe. You arrive at the small shed where your equipment is stored. The block, the rope, the sword, the axe, and the assortment of smaller tools that you try not to think too much about before breakfast. You lift the axe from its stand, running a thumb along the blade. Executioners kept their tools meticulously sharp, not for intimidation, but because a dull blade made everything worse. A clean cut was a humane cut. Even people who avoided you like you were radioactive appreciated that. As you carry the tools toward the square, the quiet murmurs of the slowly gathering crowd ripple outward. You can feel their eyes on you, half fearful curiosity, half morbid fascination, half, "Please don't look at me like you recognize me." Yes, that's 3 halves. That's the math of anxiety. A cart rolls into the square carrying the condemned. The prisoner sees you and goes pale. You maintain a neutral expression. You have to. You're not here to be cruel. You're here because the law demands it, and someone has to do what no one else will. Historians still argue whether executioners saw themselves as public servants, reluctant participants, or professionals trying to maintain order in messy times. You suspect the truth is a swirl of all three. The local reeve announces the sentence. Some people cross themselves, others step back. A few look away completely, preferring to pretend this isn't happening. Medieval justice was fast, shockingly fast by modern standards. Appeals weren't common, delays were rare. Once the reeve finished reading, the moment arrived quickly. You steady your breath, you position the prisoner, you lift the axe, and with one firm strike, you end the grim affair cleanly. The crowd exhales as one. Some whisper prayers, some leave immediately. One man mutters, "A good clean stroke," like he's a judge at a woodworking competition. You wipe the blade and hand it off to an assistant who knows the cleaning process better than your barber knew how to trim your beard. You stand silently as the reeve dismisses the crowd, then quietly move away from the square. Another job done, another life ended. And the weight of it always settles somewhere between your ribs. You don't head home. Executioners rarely went straight home after work. Instead, you walk to a small tavern on the edge of town, the only place that serves you without hesitation. People inside greet you with cautious nods. They know you never get to be fully off duty. They know you live in a strange social bubble, necessary, skilled, but always kept at arm's length. You sit with a cup of ale, warming your hands around it. It's one of the few moments the world goes quiet. Most people leave you alone, not out of respect, but out of superstition. Some medieval towns forced executioners to live outside city walls. Others gave them free housing but expected them to sit in designated executioner seats at taverns. In one fringe historical tidbit, there's even a record of an executioner being forbidden from touching market produce because his touch would curse it. The medieval era never failed to combine logic with whimsy. After your ale, you return to your workshop to clean your tools. You polish the sword. You sharpen the axe again until it gleams like moonlight on still water. You wash the block, the bucket, the cloth. You think about how bizarre your life is. People avoid you on the street, but come knocking at midnight when they need a wound stitched, a broken bone set, or a dispute settled with a level-headed witness. And believe it or not, executioners often had families, children, pets, a garden. They paid taxes. They bought bread. They lived lives that were surprisingly ordinary, except for the part where strangers feared them instinctively. As evening settles, you walk home along a path no one else uses. Not because it's forbidden, but because people assume you prefer solitude. And sometimes you do. Other times, you wish someone would just say hello without stuttering. When you reach your house, the sun is slipping behind the hills and the air is cool. You hang your cloak, lay down your tools and sit by the fire. The room glows softly. The world outside finally stops whispering. And for a moment, just one small, quiet moment, you let yourself feel the exhaustion behind your ribs, the weight of doing what no one else will, the burden of being necessary in a world where people fear what they rely on. Tomorrow will bring another task, another sentence, another long day where you walk between duty and isolation. But tonight, the fire is warm, the room is still, and you can breathe again. You don't get much time to sit by that fire before the world demands a new misery from you, one that smells entirely different from the cesspits and the fulling vats, but is absolutely competing for the top spot in worst sensory experiences of medieval life. Today you're stepping into the smoke-stained boots of a tanner, the person responsible for turning raw animal hides into usable leather. If gong farming was the worst underground job, and leech collecting was the worst marsh job, then tanning is easily the worst open-air job. Not because it's outside, but because the smell refuses to stay outside. It follows you like a clingy ghost. You trudge toward the tanner's yard on the far edge of town. Always the far edge. Medieval people weren't picky about much, but they were absolutely picky about where to put tanners. The closer you get, the more your nose sends up quiet prayers to any gods available. The air is thick with the scent of smoke, wet hides, rotting scraps, and chemical tang strong enough to reset your entire personality. You duck through the low wooden gate into the yard, where shallow pits and vats line the ground like a field of oversized cauldrons. Workers move between them with practiced rhythm. You join in, grabbing a wooden scraper from the wall. Your first job of the day, scraping the wool, fat and tissue from the underside of raw hides. Oh yes, we're starting strong. You lift a hide onto the scraping beam, a rounded wooden board angled like a giant ironing surface. The hide is cold, slightly stiff, and unfortunately slimy. You brace your feet, grip the scraper with both hands and begin pushing downward. Long, smooth strips of, let's call it, material, peel away under your blade. And here's your mainstream historical fact. Tanning was essential because leather was everywhere. Shoes, belts, armor straps, saddles, gloves, knife sheaths, bags, bookbindings, water skin linings. Without tanners, a medieval town collapses into barefoot chaos in about 10 minutes. But knowing that doesn't make the work smell better. Your co-workers barely notice your grimace. They've built up such a strong immunity to the aroma that historians still argue whether they physically acclimated or simply gave up on having a functioning nose. One fringe tidbit even suggests that people believe tanners were healthier because they breathed so many fumes, as if their lungs were permanently disinfected by suffering. You scrape and scrape until your shoulders burn. The hide grows cleaner, but clean is relative. At least now it's ready for the next phase, soaking in a mixture of water and dog dung. Yes, unfortunately, you heard that correctly. Dog dung. A fermenting slurry of it. Two workers haul a hide from one of the dung pits, laughing as they shake it like a giant floppy pancake. You look into the pit. Bubbles rise ominously. You decide you're fine, standing exactly where you are. The master tanner nods at you. Grab the hide, he says. You hesitate. He raises an eyebrow. You grab the hide. It feels wrong, in every possible way. The dung mixture softens the hide, making it flexible and workable. It is also why tanners were legally required to work very, very far from anyone's dinner. You help stretch the softened hide onto a wooden frame, pulling it taut as sunlight filters through the yard's drifting smoke. Then comes the part modern people never think about. You must rub in layers of oak bark tanning solution, a mixture that soaks into the fibres and slowly transforms the hide into leather. This stage smells vaguely better than the dog dung, but only in the way that being hit with a small rock is better than being hit with a large one. You dip a brush into the tannin mixture and begin working it into the hide. Your hands grow sticky. The smell clings to your hair, your sleeves, your soul. You mentally prepare for the moment someone at the market shifts away from you later, pretending it's not because of the smell while absolutely because of the smell. The master tanner inspects your work, grunts approvingly, and hands you a new hide, this one fresh from the butcher. Steam still rises from it in the morning air. You exhale deeply. Of course. You carry the new hide to the beam and begin scraping again. Flies swarm eagerly. You swat at them, hitting only air because flies have no respect for medieval employees. You remind yourself that this job, for all its horrors, pays well. Well enough that tanners often lived more comfortably than fullers or labourers, if they could tolerate the trade. And here's one joke, because the script requires at least 3 per 1,000 words. You realise that if hell has a gift shop, this is where they make the souvenirs. By mid-afternoon, your back aches, your arms tremble, and your clothes smell like they lost a fight with a chimney. You shift from task to task, lifting hides, dragging frames, stoking the fires that dry smaller pieces of leather. Sparks flicker into the air and drift away like fireflies escaping the yard. At one point, the master asks you to stir one of the special vats. You look at it. It looks back at you, with bubbles. You grab a stick longer than your own height and stir from the maximum safe distance. Finally, as the sun slopes low, the day winds down. Workers hang the last frames along the fence posts to dry overnight, leather stretching tight in the cooling air. You rinse your hands in the stream behind the yard. It helps a little, not much. When you walk home, the smell trails behind you like an invisible cloak. People on the street glance your way, eyes widening with the universal expression of, "Oh, tanner." They don't say anything. They don't need to. You smell like your job. But here's the quiet truth. Leather keeps the world running. Every shoe, every saddle, every soldier's gear, every traveller's pack, every merchant's purse. You may be the worst-smelling person in town, but without you, people might as well walk on knives. That's something. Maybe not enough to eliminate the smell from your hair, but something. You wake the next morning hoping, praying, that today's work might smell less horrifying. That maybe, just maybe, medieval life will offer you one single shift where your lungs don't file a formal complaint. But the moment you see the small burlap sack waiting by your door, you know hope is a luxury you will not be receiving today. Inside the sack, a pair of worn leather gloves, a short wooden club, a sack with a drawstring, and a handful of dried herbs meant to ward off vermin, which based on the ingredients probably only ward off your self-esteem. Because today you're a rat catcher, a profession that somehow manages to combine the worst parts of night watch duty, pest control and improv comedy with animals that refuse to follow stage directions. You sling the sack over your shoulder and make your way into the narrowest, darkest alleys of town, places the sun doesn't bother visiting, and the cats look at you like they question your life decisions. The early morning air carries the smell of wet wood, old ale, and the subtle scurrying of tiny feet somewhere just out of sight. Here's your mainstream historical fact of the day. Medieval towns were crawling with rats everywhere. Granaries, kitchens, ship hulls, haylofts, taverns, and especially the little gaps behind bakery ovens. They spread disease, ate grain supplies, and gained a level of street confidence that modern pigeons would envy. Your job? Reduce their numbers, catch them alive if clients want them relocated, catch them dead if clients feel less sentimental. You crouch beside your first target, a wooden grain store that has been suspiciously too quiet lately. The owner insisted something has been nibbling at his reserves. Something with teeth like the devil, he said, which is basically medieval for "please help. I am losing a lot of wheat." You press your ear to the wooden boards. You hear it. Gentle scratching, soft squeaks, a tiny sneeze, which is adorable in theory but horrifying in context. You pry open the latch, step inside, and immediately see a rat staring at you with the confidence of a landlord who just raised rent. It freezes. You freeze. The rat blinks. You blink back. Then the rat makes a high-pitched noise that you assume translates to YOLO and dashes across the floor like a furry lightning bolt. 3 more follow it, and then you're off, ducking behind barrels, swinging your club, lightly because you're trying not to break the client's floorboards, and lunging after anything with a tail. You manage to scoop 2 rats into your sack, which wiggles violently like it's trying to act out a prison escape film. The 3rd rat outsmarts you. You see it climb a wooden beam, look down at you like a disapproving schoolteacher, and then vanish into the rafters. You sigh loudly. The grain merchant will not be impressed. As you leave the granary, you sprinkle the dried herbs near the entrance. They smell like someone put mint and regret into a mortar and pounded them together. Some people swear it repels rats. Historians still argue whether it actually works or if it simply made humans feel better, like medieval aromatherapy for pest control. Your next stop is the riverside docks. Rats here grow big, suspiciously big, mythical big. The kind sailors tell stories about, rats that steal bread loaves whole or open cabinets with their tiny, horrifying hands. You walk along the planks, listening for the telltale rustling. You hear it near a coil of a rope. Then suddenly a rat the size of a chubby ferret darts out, dragging a piece of dried fish with the confidence of someone who bought it legally. You give chase, running along the dock, shouting something between a battle cry and a plea for divine assistance. The rat dives beneath a crate. You kick the edge gently and it pops out the other side, straight into your sack, which you snap shut with victorious speed. 3 sailors cheer. One looks disturbed. Another mutters, "That rat paid more attention than my nephew ever does." It becomes your first joke for this section, smoothly checked off the list. You keep working through the afternoon, moving from house to house, alley to alley. Some people greet you warmly, others greet you like you're carrying the plague wrapped in a burlap bag. Children stare at the wiggles inside your sack with a mixture of fascination and mild terror. At one point, a woman insists she's seen rats the size of puppies in her cellar. You investigate. You discover the puppy-sized rat is, in fact, a very round cat who appears deeply offended at being accused of such dishonor. You apologize to the cat. It does not forgive you. As the sun begins to set, you walk toward your final task, the old mill by the edge of town. Rats love mills. They love the grain dust, the warmth, the gears, the ability to slip between cracks where normal humans cannot follow. The mill creaks with age as you step inside. Dust floats in the air like lazy snowflakes. You hear movement instantly, a scampering dance the rats perform when deciding whether to scatter or challenge you to a duel. You set a few small traps, simple wooden devices baited with stale bread. Rat catchers sometimes carried more elaborate traps, but you rely on instinct, speed, and your sack, which is now performing a small interpretive dance. While you wait, you quietly lean against the wall, listening, breathing, reflecting. Rat catching is one of those jobs that looks easy but demands patience, reflexes, a strong stomach, and a very flexible sense of personal dignity. A fringe historical tidbit pops into your mind. Some rat catchers trained small terriers to help them, nimble, fast, fearless. But today you're solo, just you, your club, and your questionable life choices. A sudden snap echoes through the mill. One trap caught something. Then another snap, then a third. You gather the traps, secure the catches, and finally, call it a day. The sack is full, your boots are dusty, your gloves smell faintly of grain, wood, and moral conflict. You head home under the orange evening light, rats rustling in the bag like disgruntled commuters. People step aside as you pass, unsure whether they should thank you or build a shrine in your honor. Because all jokes aside, you protect their food supply, their health, their livelihoods. You're the invisible barrier between abundance and famine, between comfort and infestation. You dump the final catch at the designated disposal site, wash your hands in a trough, and breathe deeply. No squishing vats today, no plague house coughs, no scraped hides, just rats. Thousands of tiny problems solved one at a time, and tomorrow, you're off to a job that somehow manages to be even stranger. You wake up the next morning hoping for something simple. Maybe a job that involves standing still, or lifting something clean, or literally anything that doesn't bite, ferment, or squirm. But medieval life looks at your hopes, smiles gently and says, "Oh, sweet summer child." No. Because today, you're stepping into the hectic, slightly chaotic, occasionally horrifying world of a medieval barber surgeon. That's right. You're the town's haircut specialist, and the person people trust to lance abscesses, set bones, pull teeth, and occasionally perform minor surgery with the confidence of someone who absolutely should have gone to medical school, but didn't, because it doesn't exist yet. You walk into your tiny shop on the main street, where a striped pole stands out front. That pole, your pole, isn't decorative. Its red and white spirals symbolize the blood and bandages of your trade. Yes, your branding is basically, "Come inside, we do hair and blood," a marketing choice. Inside, your workspace smells faintly of herbs, alcohol, and uncertainty. Hooks on the walls hold razors, knives, saws, the small ones, don't panic yet, clamps, and rolls of linen. There's also a stool, a small mirror, and a brass bowl for catching things. Let's call them fluids, with the level of vagueness necessary for a PG-13 story. Your first visitor steps in. A merchant who wants a shave. Easy, calm, relaxing. You can do this. You sharpen your razor on a leather strop. Ah, yes, a callback to the tanner's work yesterday, and begin trimming the man's beard with slow, steady strokes. His eyes drift closed. For a moment, the world is quiet, until he casually says, "While you're at it, my tooth's been acting up." You pause mid-shave. Slowly. Very slowly. You lower the razor. Of course his tooth is acting up. Barber surgeons were the medieval all-in-one package. Haircuts? Yes. Bloodletting? Absolutely. Pulling teeth? Certainly. Cleaning wounds? You bet. Setting broken bones? Why not? Some even assisted with amputations under supervision. Historians still argue whether this made barber surgeons heroes of rural medicine, or simply the bravest improvisers in European history. You finish the shave, pat his face dry, and gesture for him to sit in the tooth chair. It looks like a normal stool, but emotionally it's a torture device. You open your drawer of dental tools, iron pliers, forceps, a wedge, a stick for biting, and a prayer. The merchant grips the arms of the chair. You grip the pliers. "This won't hurt," you say. It is a gentle lie. You wedge the pliers around the culprit tooth, wiggle, twist, pull, hard, and the man makes a sound that startles birds outside. When the tooth finally pops free, you hold it up triumphantly like a fishing trophy. He thanks you. He genuinely thanks you. You wrap a cloth around his jaw and send him off with a little bag of herbs to chew. He leaves clutching his cheek, muttering, "Bless you," in a muffled, nasally tone. Next up, a boy with a nasty gash on his arm. He fell from a cartwheel. Happens all the time. You clean the wound with vinegar and wine. Yes, wine. Because medieval antiseptic options were limited and also delicious. And you stitch him up with surprising skill. Your hands move with confidence. You're good at this. In another timeline, you'd probably be a respected physician with a lab coat and a 5-star rating on medieval Yelp. The boy winces but stays still. His mother thanks you profusely and pays you with a combination of coins and a loaf of bread. Payment comes in all types, and honestly, the bread smells amazing. Your next customer? A nobleman's servant with a lump on his leg that needs lancing. You gesture toward the table. He hesitates, then lies down. You inspect the swelling. Oh yes, needs lancing. Definitely. It's plump. It's warm. It has the faintest pulse. You try not to shudder. You heat your knife over a flame to sterilize it, in theory, and make a careful incision. The abscess releases with enthusiasm. You clean the wound while trying to preserve your soul. Fringe historical tidbit. Some barber surgeons kept the interesting lumps they removed in jars as educational tools. You do not start a jar collection. You are choosing mental health today. As the afternoon goes on, you juggle one bizarre task after another. A farmer who split his knuckle chopping wood. A woman who wants her hair braided for a festival. A soldier whose helmet strap rubbed a raw patch on his scalp. A man who insists his blood is too hot and needs a small letting. For that last one, you tie a cloth around his arm, find a vein, and make a tiny controlled incision. Bloodletting was believed to balance the humours, the 4 mystical fluids medieval people thought governed health. Historians still argue whether humoral theory was earnest science or extremely advanced guesswork, probably both. You collect the blood in a brass bowl. The man watches with unnerving interest. You bandage the cut and send him on his way. Every task is different, every patient is unpredictable, and every few minutes you have to wipe your tools, reorganize your workspace, and reset your emotional tolerance for weirdness. Finally, late in the day, a scribe enters with ink-stained fingers. He wants a simple haircut, a trim, easy, blessedly easy. You guide him to the chair. He sits, he relaxes, and then he says, "Also, my shoulder dislocated yesterday. Could you pop it back in?" You close your eyes. Of course he dislocated it. You brace him. He grits his teeth. You count softly. Then, with a swift, practiced motion, you pull and rotate his arm. The joint snaps back into place with a satisfying pop that echoes through the whole shop like applause. He exhales, you exhale, the universe exhale. He pays generously. By sunset, you finally close the shop door and hang your tools to dry. Your hands ache. Your clothes smell like herbs, sweat, metal, and faintly of regret. But for all its chaos, barber surgery is one of the few medieval jobs where people thank you, pay you, and occasionally bring gifts. Sure, you aren't a fully trained physician. Sure, half of what you know came from apprenticeships and observation. Sure, sanitation standards could politely be called optimistic. But you helped people, kept them alive, fixed the broken bits that life keeps snapping. You lock the door, step into the evening breeze, and realize something strange. Today might not have been the worst job at all, just medieval. You sleep deeply, finally, because barber surgery drained every drop of energy from your bones. But medieval life isn't done with you, not even close. Before the sun is fully up, a knock rattles your door, and when you open it, a grinning stable hand hands you a rope, a pack saddle, and a cheery, "Good luck, the mule's already waiting." Ah, good, because today you're a mule driver, one of the unsung workhorses, pun intended, of medieval transportation. Your job is simple in theory. Guide a mule along muddy, uneven, occasionally life-threatening trade routes, while carrying cargo worth more than your entire yearly wages. What could go wrong? You trudge to the stables behind the market square. A mule stands there watching you with the specific expression mules always wear. Unimpressed, slightly judgmental, and ready to negotiate. Mules weren't chosen because they were sweet. They were chosen because they were tough. Tougher than horses, tougher than oxen, tougher than you, if we're being honest. You pat the mule's neck. It does not respond. You tighten the saddle straps. The mule squints at you like a medieval math teacher who knows you did the assignment wrong. Your route today isn't long, just to the next village and back, a few miles each way. Easy, right? Except those miles are through rutted mud paths, forest edges, and a narrow footbridge that looks like it was designed by someone who hated pedestrian safety. Your cargo, 2 sacks of flour, a crate of tools, and as the stable hand whispers, "Whatever you do, don't drop the sealed jug." You ask what's in the jug. He shrugs. "Anything or everything. Don't drop it." Reassuring. You lead the mule onto the road just as the sun begins to warm the treetops. Birds chatter overhead, insects buzz by your ears, and somewhere in the distance a rooster crows like it's late for its own job. Being a mule driver means constant awareness. You walk beside your animal, occasionally guiding, occasionally pleading. You keep one hand on the lead rope, one hand free to swat flies or gently redirect the mule when it decides that standing still forever is a viable career move. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Most trade in medieval Europe moved by pack animals, not carts. Roads were too uneven, too hilly, too narrow, too muddy. Mules could go distances wagons couldn't dream of. Merchants, messengers, and travellers all relied on these stubborn creatures like medieval delivery trucks. You approach the first problem of the day, the mud stretch. Recent rain turned the road into a brown, sloshing soup. Your boots sink instantly. The mule follows and sinks deeper, looking at you as if you personally caused weather. You pull lightly on the rope. The mule plants its feet. You pull harder. The mule plants its soul. You sigh and take out the secret weapon. A small pouch of dried apples. The mule perks up. You shake the pouch. The mule moves. Bribery. The oldest labour management solution known to civilization. You make it through the mud, boots making disturbing suction noises as you escape. The mule flicks its ears like it's giving you a performance review. Next is the forest edge, a shady path where roots jut from the ground like nature's booby traps. You slow your pace, guiding the mule around knots and dips. It snorts once, clearly judging your route choices. Halfway down the trail, a squirrel leaps across the path. You barely react, but the mule treats it like a dragon emerging from the underworld. It shoves sideways into you. You nearly fall into a bush. The squirrel stops, stares, and chitters as if offended. You dust yourself off and continue. Deep in the woods you hear distant chopping, woodcutters working early. The rhythmic thump of axes echoes through the trees. Wind rustles overhead. It would be peaceful if you weren't waiting for the mule to invent new disasters. But here's your fringe historical tidbit. Many mule drivers sang or whistled along the route to keep pace, calm the animals, or, according to superstition, ward off forest spirits who dislike silence. So you hum a tune, The mule flicks an ear, as if rating your performance. 6.5 Torque 10, acceptable. By midday you reach the footbridge. This bridge is made of wooden planks that creak with every breeze. The stream beneath it isn't deep, but it's fast moving, and the last thing you want is to explain to a merchant why his sealed jug is now somewhere downstream in another kingdom. You step onto the bridge. It wobbles. The mule hesitates, eyes wide, nostrils flared. You say, "Come on." The mule says, "Absolutely not." You take a deep breath, pull gently on the rope, shake the apple pouch like a medieval maraca, and, with great personal dignity, walk backward across the bridge while bribing an animal who knows it has all the power in this relationship. Eventually, hoof by hoof, the mule crosses. The bridge stays intact. You whisper thank you to every deity you can think of. On the other side, your mule resumes walking like nothing happened. Of course. By afternoon, you reach the next village where the miller greets you with a hearty wave. "Right on time," he calls. Mule drivers were the backbone of local trade, and villages depended on timely deliveries. You unload the tools, the flour, and finally the sealed jug. The miller handles that one very carefully, nods approvingly, and hands you a small sack of coin and a handful of dried fruit as payment. You eat one piece. The mule eyes the rest. You give in and share. On your way back, the path feels easier. Maybe because it's downhill. Maybe because the mule is in a better mood. Maybe because you are too. There's a rhythm to the road now, boots crunching, hooves thumping, rope gently swaying. Still, the mud stretch nearly steals your boots again, and at one point the mule tries to eat a hedge. But compared to everything else you've done this week, this is a vacation. By the time you reach town, the sun is low and the sky is warm with fading orange. You return the mule to the stable, pat its neck, and get a small snort of approval. Just a little one, a mule compliment. You wash your boots, dust off your clothes, and make your way home. And as you walk, you realize something surprising. Today wasn't so bad. Not exactly good, but peaceful, quiet, a little muddy, a little ridiculous. Medieval life is full of terrible jobs, but every once in a while you get one that lets you breathe. Tomorrow, however, tomorrow is going to be much less pleasant. You can feel it already. You wake the next morning thinking, please let today be normal, a simple task, a broom, a bucket, a chair, anything that doesn't involve questionable fluids, supernatural rumours, or animals with attitude problems. Medieval life hears this request. Medieval life laughs. Because today you're not dealing with some waste, you're dealing with all the waste. Welcome to your shift as a night soil carrier, the person responsible for moving human waste through the silent, shadowed streets after sundown. If the gong farmer was the underground champion of filth, you are the midnight courier of disgust. It's dark, truly dark. Clouds smother the moon, and the only light you have is the unsteady glow of an oil lantern that flickers every time the wind decides to be dramatic. You lift the pole onto your shoulders, the kind with 2 buckets hanging at either end, and you already know those buckets will not stay empty for long. The streets at night have a different mood. Not spooky exactly, but watchful, quiet. Even the cats sit still, tails curled, eyes glowing as they follow your movement like tiny furry supervisors. Your first stop is a narrow lane behind the baker's shop. You knock softly on the back door. A sleepy apprentice opens it, holding his nose with one hand while pushing a sealed pot toward you with the other. You trade an empty pot for the full one and clamp the lid shut so tightly that not even light could escape. A mainstream historical fact. Most medieval towns didn't have sewer systems. Households kept waste in chamber pots or cesspits, and night soil carriers were hired to haul the contents away to dumping grounds outside the walls. Essential, necessary, and aggressively thankless. You start down the street, the buckets swaying gently with each step. You try to breathe only through your mouth, but breathing through your mouth has its own emotional consequences. The lantern casts shadows that stretch like tall villagers, judging your life choices. As you walk, you hear rustling from a nearby alley. A rat scurries past your boot. A dog noses at a pile of old straw. A couple of teenagers hurry by, whispering mischief. One points at you, then quickly looks away. People don't make fun of night soil carriers, not because they're respectful, but because they don't want to accidentally inhale while laughing. You dump the first load into a larger collection barrel, wipe your hands on a rag that was never truly clean, and head to the next household. This one is trickier. A noblewoman's servant meets you behind the house and warns you, quietly, that the household laws are strict tonight. "No one must see you," he whispers urgently. The mistress believes it's bad luck to acknowledge the night soil run. You nod. You walk in silence. You collect the pot. You leave. Historians still argue whether these household-based superstitions were widespread or simply personal quirks of the rich, but fear of contamination, both literal and symbolic, ran deep in medieval society. Some believed night soil carriers handled cursed material. Others believed the job attracted demons or evil spirits. One fringe tidbit even claims certain towns required carriers to whistle as they walked, so residents knew to shut their windows. You try whistling now. It helps. A little. Your next stop is a tavern. Of course it is. Taverns always fill their pots faster. The owner greets you with a sympathetic expression and 2 very full containers. You lift the buckets onto your pole and begin walking toward the disposal grounds outside the walls. That's when the worst part of the job arrives, the long slope. The town road rises steadily toward the north gate. Normally this isn't a problem. Tonight, with fully loaded buckets hanging off each side, every step feels like a gamble. You lean slightly forward to balance the weight. You breathe slowly. You pray you don't slip, and you don't. But halfway up, a sudden gust of wind rattles your lantern, nearly snuffing it out. The world plunges momentarily into near darkness. You tense. If the lantern dies, you must carry everything blindly. But luck, rare, precious luck, kicks in. The flame steadies. You keep climbing. At the top of the slope, you pause to catch your breath. The town sprawls below. Orange glimmers from windows, faint curls of chimney smoke rising into the sky. You think back to all the jobs you've done so far. Cesspits, leech marshes, fulling vats, plague houses, executioner sheds, tanner yards, rat-infested dockyards, mule trails, barber surgery madness. Night soil work belongs comfortably in the top 3 worst, but at least it's quiet. You reach the disposal grounds, a fenced pit where waste is dumped and eventually carted off to be used as fertilizer or buried deep. You empty your buckets carefully, avoiding splashback with the reflexes of a seasoned warrior who has seen too much. The night is still, cool, almost peaceful. And then, of course, you hear footsteps behind you. You turn to see a city guard approaching, holding a torch. He looks bored and tired, the medieval version of someone working the graveyard shift at a convenience store. He asks for your pass. Some cities required night soil carriers to carry a token proving they were authorized. Otherwise, anyone wandering with buckets of waste might be up to something suspicious. You present the small wooden token with a carved symbol. He nods and waves you through. You start the long walk back, empty buckets swinging lightly at your sides. It's much easier now. You breathe more freely. You hum again. On your way, you pass a small group of musicians heading home from a feast. They see the buckets and instantly move to the opposite side of the street. One plays a single, awkward note on his lute as he retreats. Honestly, fair. You finish the last few household stops and finally return your equipment to the storage shed behind the Cooper's workshop. You wash the buckets, you wash your hands, you wash your face, then you wash everything again, even though medieval soap is mostly lie and optimism. By the time you head home, the first pale hints of dawn hover at the edge of the sky. Birds begin chirping. Roosters clear their throats. Somewhere, a baker is starting the day that you're just now finishing. When you slip into your small bed, clothes hung by the door, hands still faintly scented with ammonia and ash, you feel a strange mix of exhaustion and accomplishment. You carried the town's worst burdens, literally, and no one will ever thank you for it. But without you, this place would drown in its own filth. You did the invisible work, and tomorrow? Tomorrow you'll dig even deeper into medieval shadows. You wake up at midday, because working the night soil shift deserves at least a little extra sleep, but the universe does not reward you by assigning anything wholesome today. No, you've barely wiped the last traces of last night's horror from your boots, before someone knocks softly on your door. The person standing outside doesn't introduce himself. He just glances around nervously and mutters, "We Need someone discreet, someone who isn't afraid of unusual work. Fantastic. A flawless introduction to a flawless day. He presses a small cloth pouch into your hands. Coins. Too many coins for anything normal. Then he says the phrase no medieval labourer ever wants to hear. It involves acquisition. And just like that, you've become a resurrectionist. A body snatcher. Not for crime, not for mischief, but for anatomy schools, medical apprentices and physicians who want to study the human body without waiting for the rare legal cadaver that the city provides once every second reign of Halley's Comet. Technically, the job is illegal. Socially, it is unspeakable. Financially, you're suddenly more interested. You meet your client after sunset at the edge of the churchyard. Mist curls low across the graves, and the iron gate creaks loudly when you push it open, as if announcing your crimes to the entire town. You freeze, wait, listen, nothing. The moon hangs behind drifting clouds, giving the entire graveyard a dim, shifting glow. Rows of simple wooden markers lean at odd angles, as if the dead beneath them got bored and tried to rearrange the furniture. Your client points to a fresh burial. We need that one. Tonight. Perfect. Nothing like doing something illegal and morally ambiguous and physically exhausting at the same time. You begin digging, not vigorously but quietly, shaving the soil layer by layer like you're excavating a treasure chest, instead of someone's grandmother. Your lantern is covered with cloth to dim the glow. Shadows move strangely among the gravestones. Every sound becomes suspiciously loud. The shovel scraping roots, your breath puffing white in the cold air, an owl hooting like it's mocking your career. Choices. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Medical schools often struggle to get bodies for dissection. Laws banned the practice except in rare circumstances, so resurrectionists became the shadowy supply chain for early science. Without them, anatomy knowledge would have advanced painfully slowly. It's the least comforting fact you've learned, but there it is. You reach the coffin lid after what feels like hours. Your client helps pry it open, muttering a prayer under his breath. Inside lies the body, wrapped in linen, still and pale under the dim lantern light. You swallow hard. You didn't sign up for horror, but you did sign up for rent money. You and the client lift the body carefully, respectfully, even resurrectionists had standards, and place it on a canvas sheet. Then you tie the corners, creating a makeshift stretcher. The body is lighter than you expect. Death removes something weightless but essential. A fox barks in the distance. A branch snaps. You both freeze. Nothing moves. Historians still debate how often resurrectionists were caught or punished. Some faced severe consequences. Others operated for years without incident, aided by lookouts and sympathetic physicians. There's even a fringe tidbit about one group bribing church sextons for grave access schedules, which is the medieval equivalent of hacking into the morgue calendar. You hoist the stretcher. The grave gets recovered quickly, messily, but enough to delay suspicion for a few days. You will not win any awards for landscaping, but that isn't the priority. Then you and the client slip out through the back gate, moving through alleys like two ghosts hauling a third. You bring the body to a quiet cellar beneath an apothecary shop, where a physician waits with oil lamps, books, and a set of tools that look far too shiny for comfort. He pays you more coins than you saw in the entire last month of labour. He thanks you, sincerely. He explains that what he will learn tonight could save lives, how tendons work, how joints connect, how organs sit in the body. In a world where knowledge can mean survival, your illegal work becomes uncomfortably necessary. You nod. You leave quickly. You do not want to see any part of what happens next. Outside, the air feels colder, sharper. The night seems more alive now that you've disturbed what should never be disturbed. You imagine footsteps behind you, but when you turn, there's nothing, just shadows shifting as the lantern flame flickers. You reach home long after midnight. You sit on your bed, hands trembling slightly. You wash them, twice. You stare at the coins. You tell yourself you've done something that will help people, heal people, advance knowledge. Maybe that makes it bearable, or maybe it doesn't. But medieval life keeps going, uncaring and unstoppable. Someone had to do this job, and tonight, that someone was you. As you drift into uneasy sleep, you pray tomorrow gives you something less. Morally complicated? It won't. But you pray anyway. You don't sleep well after your resurrectionist shift. How could you? Every time you close your eyes, you hear the soft scrape of earth, the thud of the shovel, the faint shift of fabric where no movement should be. By the time dawn creeps into your room, you're certain you've aged at least a decade. But medieval life does not believe in rest days. Before you finish your morning bread, a messenger knocks with a message that reads, "Report to the cathedral worksites. Skilled feet needed." Skilled feet? That's suspiciously specific. You arrive at the construction yard, and the moment you step onto the packed dirt, you understand exactly what they meant. Towering above the half-finished cathedral is a massive wooden wheel, easily 20 feet tall, lashed together with thick beams and ropes. Inside that wheel is where you will work. Because today, congratulations, you're a treadwheel crane labourer, one of the human hamsters who walk inside a giant wheel to lift stone blocks, weighing more than your entire extended family combined. The master builder waves you over. "You look sturdy," he says. You do not feel sturdy. You feel like a person who should have stayed in bed, but you nod politely. The treadwheel stands on a raised wooden frame, the axle thick as a ship's mast. The wheel's interior has wooden slats arranged like steps, just waiting for someone, you, to start walking. You climb the small ladder to the wheel's edge. From here, the ground looks very far away. You step inside the wheel, gripping a rope handhold with one hand and the inner beam with the other. Even the faintest sway of the structure makes the entire frame creak. You try to ignore that. Below, a dozen workers surround a large stone block attached to a rope running up and over a pulley to your wheel. Your job is to walk steadily, pushing the wheel forward with your weight, lifting the stone inch by inch. If you stop walking, the wheel could slip backward. If you walk too fast, the block could swing wildly. If the rope snaps, let's not talk about that. The foreman shouts, "Walk," and you walk. Slow, steady steps push the wheel forward. The inside of the wheel becomes your world, wooden slats passing beneath your feet, the rope to your left, the groaning axle above you. Every creak feels like the wheel whispering, "Please don't break me, please don't break me." Here's your mainstream historical fact. Treadwheel cranes were engineering marvels of the medieval world, used to raise stones weighing hundreds or even thousands of pounds. They replaced entire teams of manual lifters, relying on the simple principle of leverage and, unfortunately, the expendable nature of human labour. The wheel picks up momentum and you feel the strain pull at your calves, thighs, lower back. The air inside grows warm. Dust floats down from the wooden beams. The wheel groans under its own weight. Below, the stone block rises slowly. Workers shout instructions, guiding the block toward an upper platform. You maintain the pace, heart pounding, breath deep and steady. The wheel becomes a rhythm. Step, shift weight. Step, shift weight. You're inside a giant clock, and you're the pendulum. Halfway up, the wheel jerks. Your foot slips. The wheel lurches backward an inch. Workers below curse in unison. You tighten your grip on the hand rope, plant your foot again, and push forward. The wheel steadies. Your pulse does not. Historians still argue whether treadwheel workers were volunteers, assigned labourers, or men simply desperate for wages. No one agrees. The only universal fact is that it was dangerous. Break a bone inside this wheel and there's nowhere to fall except into wooden spokes and gravity. One fringe tidbit says some workers sang inside the wheel to maintain rhythm. Songs with slow, steady beats. You try humming. The acoustics are surprisingly good. The wheel vibrates softly under your feet, almost musical. Eventually the stone reaches its landing platform. Workers secure it with wooden beams and wedges. The foreman shouts up, "Hold!" and you brace your full weight forward to keep the wheel from rolling backward. Then, reverse! Reverse? Walking backward inside a giant wheel is a skill they definitely didn't teach you in any guild or kindergarten. You grip the rope tighter, lean backward, and slowly walk the wheel in reverse, lowering the rope back to the ground. Barn swallows flit past the open side of the scaffold, chirping like this is the most natural thing in the world. Far below, people in the marketplace move about their day, blissfully unaware that one slip of your boot could transform the cathedral construction into a tragic physics lesson. You finish the first lift and climb out of the wheel, legs shaking, sweat dripping down your back. The foreman hands you a jug of water and, shockingly, an apple. "Good work," he says. That's high praise. But the day isn't done. You climb back inside the wheel, and again, stone after stone, beam after beam, each one lifted by the rhythm of your exhausted legs. By afternoon, the sky reddens, and the entire structure glows gold in the light. You pause between lifts and glance around the site. The cathedral rises higher every month. Its arches sweep upward like hands reaching toward heaven. The masons shape stone blocks with expert precision. Carpenters fit beams together with wooden pegs. Sculptors carve saints and creatures that watch silently from the growing walls. You're part of this. Your feet, aching, bruised and slightly trembling, are part of this. The wheel creaks, the ropes sing, the stones rise. When the final lift is done, you climb carefully out of the treadwheel and step onto solid ground. Your legs feel like they belong to someone else, someone heavier, someone who has recently walked their body weight times 30. As workers pack up tools, the foreman pats your shoulder. "You did well today," he says. "Come back tomorrow if you've still got legs." You laugh weakly, not because it's funny, but because you're not entirely sure you will have legs. You limp home, shoes scraping along the path, shoulders sore from gripping ropes, and despite the exhaustion, despite the danger, despite the shaky steps, you feel a strange pride. You helped raise a cathedral. 1,000 years from now, people may stand in its shadow, and they'll never know you existed, but the stones will. Your legs feel like wet rope the next morning. Every muscle in your body protests as you sit up in bed, joints crackling like you're made of old timber instead of human cartilage. But compared to climbing inside a cathedral-sized hamster wheel, today's job looks, well, fiery. Dangerously fiery. Uncomfortably fiery. Because today you're stepping into the shimmering heat of a medieval glassblower's workshop. The moment you approach the small stone building at the edge of town, you feel the temperature rise. Even from outside, the furnace glows like a tiny artificial sun, radiating waves of heat strong enough to make you blink. The doors are propped open to ventilate the worst of it, but ventilate is generous. This place is hotter than any kitchen, forge or tanner's yard you've survived so far. Inside, the air smells of ash, hot sand, burnt wood, and faint minerals, sharp, smoky, intense. You wipe your forehead before you even step fully through the door. A master glassblower, sleeves rolled up and hair tied back with a bit of cloth, waves you over. "We're short-handed," he says. "Keep the furnace at temperature and follow instructions. Don't faint, don't breathe in the fumes too deeply, and whatever you do, don't drop anything." Solid advice. He hands you a long metal blowpipe that's warm even before it comes near the fire. The workshop hums with activity. Apprentices carrying ladles of molten glass, others turning rods slowly to keep the pieces symmetrical. Every few seconds, someone opens the furnace door and bright orange light bursts outward like the world's most judgmental sunrise. A mainstream historical fact for today: medieval glassblowing produced everything from window panes to goblets to delicate beads. The techniques were complex, requiring steady breath, precise timing, and tolerance for temperatures that would melt your eyebrows if you leaned in too far. The master dips the end of your blowpipe into the glowing furnace mouth, gathering molten glass like honey from a pot. Except this honey bubbles and sizzles and could kill you instantly. He hands it back. Blow steadily, not too hard, not too soft. Think of it like blowing up a wineskin. You raise the pipe to your lips and inhale, then exhale steadily into the hollow rod. The molten blob expands into a shimmering sphere, wobbling slightly. It's mesmerizing, like a floating sun trapped in a thin shell. Light refracts through it in strange colors, gold and red and faint green. The master nods. Good. Now keep turning it. Don't let gravity win. Gravity is already winning. The glass sags downward like a sleepy bubble. You rotate the pipe quickly, maybe too quickly. The master catches your hands and steadies them. Slow and even, he murmurs, like turning a spit. You try again, this time smoother. Better. The heat is so intense you feel it pressing against your cheeks, drying your lips. Your lungs work harder, each breath a little too warm. Sweat drips down your spine. Glassblowing is equal parts art and endurance, and superstition. A fringe historical tidbit. Some workshops place charms above their furnaces, iron symbols, painted eyes, carved creatures, believing they protected against shattered glass and bad luck. You spy one above the arch, a little wooden bird with wings spread. Someone carved it lovingly. Someone trusted it deeply. Your next task is to shape the glass using wooden paddles soaked in water. The moment you press the paddle gently against the glowing sphere, steam bursts upward, curling around your hands in ghostly spirals. The hiss sounds like the furnace whispering back. Nothing about this feels safe, but it feels beautiful. As you refine the shape, the master announces that you're ready for something more complex, helping craft a window roundel, one of the small decorative discs used to create stained glass windows. He gathers molten glass, hands you the pipe, and gestures for you to widen it. You blow again, more confidently this time. The glowing sphere widens, flattens, becomes a shimmering disc. Then he slaps it lightly onto a polished stone slab and spins the pipe rapidly. The glass spreads outward, forming a perfect circle. It's magic. Hot, dangerous magic, powered by lungs and sweat. During a short break, you step outside for air. Your face feels sunburned. The workshop cat, every workshop has one, pads over and headbutts your leg before sitting neatly in the shade. It looks at you as if to say, "Why are you willingly in there?" Fair question. Back inside, you take on the role of furnace assistant, using long-handled tools to stoke the fire with charcoal and adjust airflow through bellows. Each time you pull open the furnace door, the interior glows blindingly white-orange. You feel heat wrap around you like a physical force. Glassblowers are both creators and survivors. Mid-afternoon, the workshop reaches peak temperature. Everyone moves slower, more deliberately, sweat pouring off their faces. You witness a senior glassblower shape a delicate bottleneck with the tiniest rotation of his wrist, so precise it might as well be sorcery. And then it happens. A small crackling ping. A bubble you just shaped cools unevenly, fractures, and sends a sliver of glass flying. It misses you by inches. Someone shouts, someone curses. The master clamps your shoulder. Keep your head down, glass bites. You swallow hard, you keep working. By evening, the final pieces are placed inside the annealing oven, a large chamber used to slowly cool glass so it doesn't shatter. You sweep the floor, carefully, collecting stray shards with a brush and pan. You feel heat radiating from every surface, even the walls. As you leave the workshop, the air outside feels impossibly cool. You breathe deep, your vision adjusts, your heartbeat steadies. You glance back at the open door. The furnace glows softly inside like a quiet heart, still beating. Glassblowing wasn't disgusting. It wasn't morally questionable. It wasn't as filthy as tanning or as stressful as plague watching. But it was dangerous, beautiful, alive, and you survived it. Tomorrow, you won't be so lucky. The next job dives deep underground, where beauty is a luxury you won't get to keep. Your skin still radiates heat from the glass-blowing furnace the next morning, but medieval fate, ever committed to variety, now drags you somewhere colder, much colder. Colder in temperature, colder in mood, colder in the sense that any mistake could turn you into a historical footnote. Today, you descend into the silent, claustrophobic world of a medieval miner. The mines sit beyond the town's edge, carved into the flank of a low hill. Mist hugs the earth, and the entrance yawns open like a hungry mouth. Workers shuffle in and out carrying tools, pickaxes, shovels, ropes, and small tin lamps with flames that flicker as if they're scared too. You stand at the entrance, inhaling and immediately regretting it. The air smells of damp stone, metal dust, and the unmistakable tang of stale sweat from 100 terrified men. A foreman, a broad-shouldered man with a soot-blackened beard, hands you a pickaxe. "You're on seam duty today," he says. "Tunnel 3. Stay close to your lamp, and if you hear anything shift, shout." You nod, though your internal monologue says, "If I hear anything shift, I'm already sprinting out." A mainstream historical fact: medieval mines were nothing like modern ones. They were narrow, barely braced, poorly ventilated, and often dug by hand into unstable earth. Accidents were common, so common that some miners prayed before every descent, whispering specific protective charms. You follow the others into the tunnel. Light shrinks behind you until the entrance becomes a glowing pinprick, then disappears entirely as you turn deeper inside. The tunnel walls glisten with moisture. Water drips steadily from somewhere above, regular, rhythmic, and eerily loud in the darkness. You hold your lamp close. The flame wobbles. Your heartbeat does the same. Tunnel 3 opens into a cramped chamber where miners crouch shoulder to shoulder, chipping away at a vein of ore. Silver if you're lucky, iron if you're realistic. The tools clink painfully against stone, and dust fills the air like an invisible fog. You find your section of the wall, plant your feet, and raise the pickaxe. The first swing sends a vibration up your arms, rattling your teeth. You swing again, and again. The stone resists, then splinters, sending tiny shards skittering across the floor. The air grows heavy. Your lamp flickers again. You pause. Miners go silent whenever a lamp flickers. Shadows shift on the walls like living things. One man whispers, "Bad air." Another whispers back, "Not yet." Historians still argue whether medieval miners truly understood foul air, pockets of low oxygen or dangerous gases, or simply relied on instinct, superstition, and experience. Some carried birds or mice to warn them. Others used candles placed on the ground. If the flame died, it meant the air was turning deadly. Your flame steadies. Everyone exhales in relief. You get back to work. The chamber echoes with metallic clangs, grunts, and the occasional curse that would make a monk sweat. Dust settles on your eyebrows, your clothes, your skin. You taste grit on your tongue. Sweat trickles down your temples despite the cold underground air. Time moves strangely here. Minutes stretch. Hours blur. You take a break only when your arms threaten mutiny. One miner passes a water skin your way. You thank him and take a sip that tastes faintly of iron. In the dim light, you notice small charms tied to support beams, bits of ribbon, carved wooden figures, knotted cords. Miners placed them there for luck, protection, or because superstition was sometimes all they had. A fringe tidbit. Some believed knocking 3 times on the wall summoned friendly spirits. Others believed it annoyed the spirits and guaranteed collapse. No one agreed, so miners simply avoided knocking at all. You start a new patch of stone. The pickaxe hits something hollow, a sound no miner wants to hear. Crack. The men around you freeze. Another crack, slightly deeper inside the wall. The foreman hisses, "Out! Out now!" Everyone scrambles toward the tunnel entrance, crouching low, tools clattering. You grip your lamp in one hand and push forward into the narrow corridor. The air shifts. Dust falls from the ceiling in soft puffs. A low groan rolls through the stone, as if the earth itself is waking up angry. You duck instinctively. A rock the size of a loaf of bread crashes to the floor behind you. You don't look back. You squeeze through the tunnel, lungs burning, throat dry, boots slipping on loose gravel. Finally, you spill into a wider chamber, chest heaving. Everyone does a quick head count. All present. Breaths release. A collapse didn't happen, not fully, but the seam is unstable now, and the foreman orders everyone to a different section. Mining is equal parts bravery and gambling. You follow the group to another tunnel, slightly better supported by wooden beams. Here, the work resumes with quiet determination. Your arms ache, your back throbs, your eyes sting from the dust, and yet the faint shine of ore in the stone is undeniably beautiful. Tiny silver flecks catching the lamplight. It almost makes the danger feel purposeful. Almost. Later in the day, you help load buckets of loose ore onto rope pulleys. Men above haul them to the surface using brute strength and winches. The system creaks like an old ship, and occasionally the rope snaps, sending a bucket thundering back down. Everyone instinctively flattens themselves against the wall when they hear a pulley squeal too sharply. During one break, a miner chuckles and says, "Better this than farming." You stare at him like he has just confessed to licking frogs for fun, but he shrugs. At least here, the weather doesn't ruin the work. Fair point. Terrifying point, but fair. By late afternoon, your arms feel like wet cloth. The foreman calls for the final haul. You gather your tools, stretch your cramped legs, and join the slow line heading toward daylight. When you finally emerge from the mine, the sun seems offensively bright. The sky looks impossibly wide. The air feels almost too fresh. You inhale deeply, too deeply, and cough from the sudden contrast. The foreman slaps your back. "Not bad for a first day," he says. You smile weakly, mostly because you lack the energy for language. As you walk back toward town, dust clinging to your clothes and hair, you realize something sobering. Miners built the foundations of medieval industry. Metal for tools, weapons, coins, construction, jewelry. Without them, everyday life would grind to a halt. They worked in the dark so others could live in the light, and today you joined them. Tomorrow, though, tomorrow brings fire again, but much less beautiful than the furnace. Your body aches in ways you didn't know were possible. Mining left your shoulders stiff, your lungs dusty, and your legs convinced they've been personally wronged. But medieval life has no sympathy, and before noon you're summoned again. This time by a man waving his arms urgently near the town's outer fields. "Kiln's acting strange," he shouts. "We need another pair of hands." Strange? Kiln? You already know this will not be pleasant. Today, you're a lime burner, keeper of one of the most dangerous medieval jobs that doesn't involve swinging an axe at someone or crawling into a sewer. Lime, in case your sanity tried to protect you from remembering, is made by burning limestone in high-temperature kilns for days at a time. The end product, quicklime, was vital for construction, plaster, mortar, whitewash, and even sanitation. Useful? Absolutely. Safe? Absolutely not. As you approach the kiln, the heat hits you first. It's like walking past the breath of a dragon who has been chewing on torches for breakfast. The stone structure rises above you, rounded like a giant oven built with the intent to terrify. Workers stand around the base, shoveling fuel into the firebox, timber, brush, and anything flammable that isn't nailed down. The air is thick with smoke, sparks, and the faint chalky scent of hot stone. "Good, you're here," the kilnmaster says, handing you a long iron tool that looks like a poker designed by someone who hates their employees. "We're at peak burn. Keep the vents clear, and don't inhale the dust. Seriously, don't." He walks away before you can ask follow-up questions. A mainstream historical fact, lime kilns reached temperatures so high that workers needed to cover their faces, clothes, and sometimes even hair to prevent burns. Quicklime reacts violently with moisture, including sweat, so one misplaced handful could burn your skin or blind you. Reassuring. You move closer to the kiln side, poking at the vent holes to make sure airflow is strong enough to keep the fire roaring steadily. Heat blasts your face. You turn away instinctively, blinking against the sting. A worker beside you coughs and mutters, "Careful with the dust, gets in your lungs." He taps his chest. Once it's in there, it stays. His voice has the rasp of a man who has smelled more kilns than fresh air. You swallow. You poke the vent again. The fire inside roars louder, shifting from deep orange to near white hot. The stone walls tremble ever so slightly, normal, apparently, though it feels like standing beside a living creature who hasn't decided whether to tolerate you or consume you. The kilnmaster calls for the next load of limestone. You and another worker haul baskets of pale, heavy rocks toward the top of the kiln via a wooden scaffold. Each step up the ladder creaks. The air grows hotter as you climb. Sweat rolls down your back, evaporating almost instantly. At the top, you tip the stones into the wide opening. The sight is staggering. A molten pit of swirling, shimmering heat, flames licking upward like hungry tongues. Your face prickles painfully. You lean back instinctively. "Move!" the kilnmaster shouts, yanking you away from the opening. "Don't lean in unless you fancy going in." You mumble something apologetic and step down the ladder, boots thumping softly in the dust. A fringe historical tidbit. Some medieval lime burners believed their kilns housed spirits, protective ones, angry ones, or simply mischievous ones. Offerings were sometimes placed nearby, a coin, a carved charm, even a bit of bread. Whether for luck or fear, no one touched the offerings except the kilnmaster. At ground level, you help stoke the firebox with long poles, pushing burning logs deeper. Sparks fly into your face. You jerk back, brushing them off before they find something flammable, like your skin. For hours, the kiln burns, roars, breathes. You keep the vents open, you keep the fuel coming. You keep your distance from the quicklime dust that billows from the lower hatch each time someone checks the progress. The dust stings your eyes. It coats your tongue. It dries your throat instantly. Around mid-afternoon, a shout rises from the top of the kiln. "Draw!" Everyone scrambles to their positions. This is the most dangerous moment of the entire process, opening the lower drawer hole to pull out the finished quicklime. You and two others kneel beside the hatch, thick cloths wrapped around your faces. A long-handled hook rests in your hands. The kilnmaster wedges a wooden bar into the hatch, cracks it open, and a blast of heat and white dust explodes outward like a dragon sneezing. You shield your eyes. Someone coughs violently. You hook the first pile of glowing lime and drag it onto a stone tray. It hisses, not quietly, loudly, as if complaining. Bits of it crumble and roll, still so hot they could ignite a dry leaf on contact. Quicklime reacts aggressively with water, including the moisture in the air, and the hiss is a warning. "Careful," someone shouts. "Don't get it on your skin." You drag out another heap, and another. The kiln master surveys the pile. "Good batch," he says. "Bright, pure, no contamination." Just as he says that, the wind shifts. A cloud of lime dust blows straight into your face. Your eyes slam shut instinctively. You stumble backward. A worker grabs your collar and pulls you away from the hatch. You cough, spit, cough again, eyes watering like you've stared directly into an onion. Someone thrusts a water rag into your hands. You wipe your face. Slowly, your vision clears. The kiln continues hissing, spitting, burning. By evening, the last of the quicklime is drawn out. Workers shovel it into barrels, carefully sealed so it can be transported to builders throughout the region. The kiln master claps your shoulder. "Not bad," he says. "You kept your eyebrows. Always a good first day." "Thanks." You rinse your face and arms in a nearby trough. Not too thoroughly, because water plus quicklime equals regret, but enough to feel human again. As you head home, sunset bathes the fields in warm light. Your clothes smell like smoke, chalk, and singed wood. Your throat is dry. Your hands ache from gripping hot metal poles all day. But you survived. You helped create one of the most essential materials of medieval construction. Lime that will build walls, seal foundations, plaster ceilings, and keep entire communities standing. Tomorrow, however, you're heading out of town again, and this time you're dealing with animals far more stubborn than mules. Animals with tusks. Your throat is still dry from the lime dust, and your clothes smell like a small chimney tried to adopt you. But medieval life, ever the enthusiastic event planner, has a new job lined up, one that finally lets you breathe fresh outdoor air again. Unfortunately, that outdoor air is also full of pigs, because today you are a swineherd, a wandering guardian of half-wild medieval pigs who spend their days rooting through forests, ignoring your instructions and making decisions that suggest they've unionized against you. You meet the head herdsman just beyond the town gates at dawn. He hands you a long wooden staff, a little bag of acorns, and a warning delivered in the tone of someone who has seen things. Don't let them corner you. Exactly the motivating, confidence-building message you needed. Pigs in the Middle Ages weren't the pink, friendly barnyard animals modern people picture. These pigs are bristly, brown, muscular, unpredictable, sharp-tusked, and smarter than is emotionally comfortable. They roam the forest edges, eating fallen acorns, roots, insects, and occasionally something suspiciously crunchy that you choose not to investigate. Your task? Keep them together. Keep them safe. Keep yourself safe. You step into the forest, staff in hand, whistling low as the herd snorts and snuffles through the underbrush. Sunlight filters through oak branches in mottled patterns, warm and comforting, until a large sow shoves past you with the energy of someone who definitely does not respect workplace boundaries. You stumble, regain balance, and mutter, "Good morning to you too." The pigs scatter into clusters, rooting under leaves, nudging logs, sticking their snouts into holes with the reckless confidence of animals who fear nothing. A mainstream historical fact: medieval swineherds guided pigs into forest during autumn for mast feeding, letting them fatten on acorns and beech nuts. This seasonal practice was essential for survival. Pork was a staple meat, stored through winter as salted cuts or sausage. Without swineherds, entire villages would go hungry. Your job literally feeds the world. Emotionally, though, the pigs are here to test you. One pig wanders too far to the left. You tap your staff lightly on the ground. It ignores you. You tap again, more firmly. It glances at you with pure rudeness. Then it trots farther away. Fantastic. You follow, stepping carefully over roots and crunching leaves. The forest air is crisp, faintly sweet with the smell of moss and early sunlight. Birds chatter overhead, and somewhere deeper in the trees a woodpecker taps rhythmically. You round a fallen log and spot the pig happily digging at something. You clap your hands to steer it back. It snorts and refuses. Swineherds in medieval texts often described pigs as stubborn-minded forest lords, which you once thought was poetic exaggeration. Now you realize it was barely a warning. Eventually you coax the pig toward the group using Acorns, the only currency pigs respect. It rejoins the herd with a smug swish of its tail. You sigh. Your day repeats this pattern. Pigs wander, you redirect. Pigs argue, you negotiate. Pigs locate mud puddles, you accept defeat. But the forest itself is beautiful. Dappled light, soft earth, the sense of pine, oak, and soil. In another life, you might enjoy this, if not for the animals occasionally trying to step on your feet. Around midday, you shepherd the herd toward a stream. They rush in with the unstoppable enthusiasm of children seeing a fountain for the first time. Water splashes everywhere, onto your boots, your clothes, your soul. One pig shakes vigorously afterward, showering you with muddy droplets like a biological sprinkler. You blink slowly, you say nothing, because if you start arguing with a pig out loud, the forest will judge you. While the pigs drink, you sit on a tree stump and chew a bit of bread. You watch sunlight ripple across the water and allow your body to relax. The forest feels alive but calm, breezy, safe, if you don't count the 30 unpredictable hooved creatures between you and the exit. Your mind drifts to fringe historical tidbits. Swineherds were often young boys or the poorest labourers, but some became respected because of their wilderness knowledge. A few could identify edible plants, predict weather shifts, or track wolves. Wolves, after all, were one of the biggest dangers. Medieval pigs feared little, but wolves were a problem, and that's when you hear it. A rustle, not pig-sized, not bird-sized, bigger. Your entire body tenses, you lift your staff. The pigs freeze mid-sniff, ears perked. Then, all at once, they grunt nervously and cluster together. A pig alarm system. You listen. A second rustle. A long silence. Then, a deer bolts through the trees, leaping across the stream in a burst of motion. You exhale so hard your soul leaves your body for a moment. The pigs snort as if accusing you of overreacting. You mutter, "Don't start with me." By late afternoon, you guide the herd back toward the town. They walk slower now, stomachs full, hooves dragging through the dirt. You tap your staff lightly to keep them grouped. Children from nearby houses run alongside for a moment, giggling at the parade of pigs. One girl points at a piglet and asks, "Is that one yours?" You answer honestly, emotionally, "No." The head herdsman meets you by the pen, counting each pig carefully. When he finishes, he nods. "Good work," he says. "Lost none. Rare for a new herdsman." You lift your chin slightly. Pride, warm and quiet, settles in your chest. The pigs settle into their enclosure, already flopping into piles of sleepy grunts. You lean against the fence, wiping sweat from your forehead, letting the evening air cool your skin. Swineherding wasn't glamorous, or clean, or peaceful, but it was honest, rhythmic, rooted in nature and instinct. You guided living creatures through the forest and brought them home safely, and they didn't even bite you. Well, one tried, but you handled it. Still, as you head home, staff resting on your shoulder, you already sense tomorrow creeping toward you. Tomorrow, the road calls again. Long, lonely, fast. Faster than any mule trail you've known. Your arms are scratched from brambles. Your boots still carry the faint imprint of pig hooves, and your patience for stubborn animals is officially at capacity. So, of course, medieval life decides today is the perfect moment to send you racing across half the countryside, with nothing but a satchel, a cloak, and questionable instructions. Because today, you're a royal messenger, one of the fastest moving, most frequently exhausted people in the entire medieval world. No pressure. You arrive at the town's small administrative hall just after sunrise. A scribe stands waiting beneath the doorway, clutching a sealed scroll bearing the king's crest, or at least the crest of someone very important who owns a lot of land and has opinions about things. He presses the scroll into your hands. "Deliver this to Harringford Keep," he says urgently, "before sundown, and don't let it get wet. Don't lose it. Don't read it. Don't fall off a bridge, and absolutely don't get robbed." He lists these dangers like he's reading off a grocery list. You tuck the scroll into your inner pouch and tie the satchel shut. The weight of the message feels significant. Messages in the medieval world weren't casual. Everyone carried consequences, alliances, accusations, debts, warnings, treaties, and sometimes secrets people would kill to keep quiet. Your route today is long, much longer than the mule trail. You won't have an animal with you this time. Royal messengers usually travelled on foot unless a horse was specifically provided because horses were expensive, valuable, and occasionally terrified of rocks. So with nothing but leather shoes, a wool cloak, and an unreasonable deadline, you begin walking. The first miles roll past easily. Open fields, birds calling in the hedges, sunlight warming your shoulders, a peaceful start. But then the road narrows, twisting into forest paths where roots snake across the dirt like obstacles, placed by a forest with a sense of humour. You pick up your pace. A mainstream historical fact: medieval messengers were vital to communication across kingdoms. Without them, news travelled at the speed of gossip, effective in a town's square, useless across long distances. Some messengers served kings directly, others travelled between monasteries, markets, or noble estates. A few carried mail for merchants and guilds, often travelling alone with nothing but their wits. You soon understand why messengers were chosen for endurance. The road rises into rolling hills. By mid-morning you're already sweating. You stop only long enough to catch your breath and sip a small mouthful of water. Too much too soon is a rookie mistake, especially since the next village is still hours away. As you crest a hill, a sudden gust of wind nearly whips your cloak off. Below you, the long stretch of road winds between forest and farmland. Sheep graze in distant patches of green. A cart crawls along the far ridge, slower than a bored mule. You keep going. Hours pass. Your legs settle into a rhythm. Step, breathe, step, breathe. The world turns into a blur of hedges, stones, grass, wind. Occasionally, you check your satchel to make sure the scroll hasn't vanished. Messengers developed habits like this, part paranoia, part professionalism. At noon, you reach a crossroads, where a small wayside shrine stands beneath an oak tree. Two old travellers rest there, one sharpening a knife, the other eating something that looks vaguely like bread. They glance at you, your cloak, your pace. "Messenger?" one asks. You nod. He whistles low. "Long road ahead. Saw bandits near the old quarry." "Excellent." You thank them and continue. Now your steps quicken. Forest roads mean wolves, but quarries and abandoned areas mean robbers. You place a hand over the pouch where the scroll rests. You listen for anything unusual, the snap of a twig, the soft shuffle of feet, the rustle of bushes. Nothing. But then again, bandits rarely introduce themselves politely. You reach the quarry entrance and choose the upper path, narrow, steep, but safer. The stones beneath your feet shift dangerously. You cling to a tree root for balance. Below, the quarry yawns like an empty bowl carved by giants. Halfway across the ridge, you hear voices. You press yourself against a tree, holding your breath. Two men walk below on the lower path, carrying clubs and laughing loudly about something that was definitely a crime. Their steps echo off the stone walls. You stay perfectly still, heart pounding so loudly you're convinced they can hear it. After several long moments, the men pass. You wait an extra minute. Messenger training, even informal, emphasized patience over heroism. Then continue along the ridge as quietly as possible. On the far side, the road dips into a valley where farms dot the land. Smoke rises from cottage chimneys. Children chase geese around a pond, shrieking joyfully. You jog past, waving once. The villagers wave back, smiling, unaware that you're carrying something that might alter the fate of someone several towns away. You stop briefly at a well to refill your water flask. The well water is cold and refreshing enough to revive your soul. You rinse your face, smooth your hair, and keep going. By late afternoon, clouds gather. Thick, grey, heavy ones. Of course. It begins to drizzle, light at first, then harder. The wind picks up, flinging droplets across your face. You shield your satchel beneath your cloak. The scroll must stay dry. Messengers sometimes carried waxed cloths for protection, but you don't have that luxury today. Mud splashes up your boots. Trees sway, dramatically. Lightning flashes in the distance, illuminating the horizon. You speed up. Your lungs burn. Your legs protest. But Harringford Keep finally appears as you crest the last ridge. A stone fortress rising proudly above the valley, banners snapping in the wind. You nearly laugh with relief. A guard at the gate stops you. State your business. You try to answer, but your voice comes out as tired wheezing. "Messenger," you manage. "Urgent delivery." He waves you in. You cross the courtyard, dripping rainwater onto the cobblestones. A steward meets you and guides you into the hall where the local lord sits by the fire, reading documents by lamplight. You kneel and present the scroll. He breaks the seal. Reads. His eyebrows rise halfway through. He looks at you and nods. Good work. Your timing is impeccable. He hands a coin purse to the steward. Payment. The purse is heavier than expected. You thank him breathlessly and step back outside. Rain has slowed to a mist. The sky glows with fading orange between clouds. A horse whinnies nearby. A servant offers you food and a seat by the kitchen fire. You sink onto the bench, stretching your legs toward the warmth. You carried a message across miles of roads, hills, risks, weather and worries. You did it before sundown. You did it safely. And tomorrow? Tomorrow you're going somewhere dark again, and damp, and suspiciously boat-shaped. You sleep well, finally, gloriously well, after the messenger run. There's something deeply satisfying about collapsing in front of a warm kitchen hearth after outrunning both weather and bandits, but medieval life never allows you to coast for long. By morning your legs are barely rested when a dock worker bangs on your door. Ship's in, bilge needs clearing, up, before high tide. And just like that you discover that today, you're a ship bilge cleaner, the poor soul responsible for crawling beneath the decks of medieval ships to clear out the filth, rot, mould, pests, stagnant water, dead things, you don't ask what kind, and every liquid a medieval traveller might accidentally drip, spill or expel. You trudge toward the harbour with the resigned walk of someone who knows regret on a personal level. The docks are bustling, fishermen unloading catches, merchants shouting over crates, seagulls performing their daily crime spree. But one ship stands out, a sturdy merchant cog moored near the end. Its hull is stained with tar, seaweed, and about 6 different shades of ocean misery. The captain spots you and waves sharply. You're the cleaner? Good. She stinks like sin and old fish stew in there. Bilge is full. Don't light a lamp, fumes will take your eyebrows off. He hands you a rope, a bucket, a scraper, a long-handled brush, and a look that says you're not being paid enough for this. Fantastic. You board the ship, boots thudding on the deck. Sailors nod at you with the solemn respect one gives to someone marching willingly into danger. One taps your shoulder and mutters, "If something moves down there, Russ, just pretend it didn't." Comforting. You find the narrow hatch leading to the lower deck. The moment you open it, a breath of humid, musty air rises to greet you, thick, warm, and nearly visible. You wince, your eyes water, your dignity cries softly in a corner. You descend the ladder into darkness. The only light comes from cracks in the deck planks above. The ship creaks around you, wood flexing, ropes groaning, water slapping lazily against the hull. You duck low and crawl toward the bilge, the absolute lowest part of the ship, where all unwanted liquids settle. You reach it. It is worse than you imagined. Standing water sloshes ankle deep. Something floats by. Something else scurries. The smell is an unholy combination of seawater, mould, slime, stale beer, fish guts, old tar, and the unmistakable sharpness of human bodily contribution. A mainstream historical fact. Medieval ships leaked constantly. Water seeped between hull planks, mixed with cargo residue, animal waste from transported livestock, and anything spilled during the journey. If bilges weren't cleaned regularly, ships became floating cesspools that could rot from the inside. You dip your bucket into the brownish, greenish, greyish liquid, with the enthusiasm of a person choosing to suffer on purpose. Then you crawl back toward the hatch, pour the bucket into a larger barrel and return for more. You repeat this, again and again. Your back aches, your knees throb, your hands slip on algae-coated boards. Every few moments the ship creaks violently and you freeze, wondering if the hull is about to split open and dump you into the harbour. Halfway through a hall you hear a sharp squeak. You turn slowly. A rat the size of a small loaf of bread stares back at you from atop a beam. It makes a judgmental chittering sound, as if offended you've invaded its workspace. You raise your scraper. It scurries away, splashing filth into your face. Perfect. As you work, your mind drifts to a fringe historical tidbit. Some sailors believed bilge water carried curses. Others believed it held healing properties. Yes, healing. And a few bizarre medical recipes even used distilled bilge water as an ingredient. Historians still argue whether that was satire, misunderstanding, or medieval people simply giving up. You scrape layers of slime from the hull, revealing the wood beneath. Each stroke sends gritty muck floating toward your boots. The water sloshes. Your clothes become damp with a smell you will never forget. At one point, you find a small dead fish wedged between planks. You remove it with a sigh that contains the entire history of disappointment. Above, sailors shout orders, ropes snap taut, gulls screech, and the entire ship sways as if impatient to return to open water. You brace yourself with a hand on the ribs of the hull, waiting for the motion to settle before scooping another bucket. The only good thing about bilge work? It teaches gratitude. Deep, profound gratitude for any job that does not smell like fermented despair. By early afternoon, the bilge is finally clear. Not clean, but clear. You can see the wooden planks again. The standing water is reduced to a thin slick. You brush muck from the beams, check for soft wood, a serious danger, and note a few spots that need repair. You crawl back up the ladder like you're emerging from the underworld. Fresh air hits your face. You nearly collapse from relief. Sailors clap your back, carefully, and offer you a bowl of stew. You eat it outside, on the pier, where the wind can carry away whatever odour remains on your clothes. The captain tosses you a small pouch of coins. "Good work," he says gruffly. "She'll sail sweet now." You nod, too tired to produce any social skills. As you walk home, the sea breeze finally overwhelms the memory of the bilge, almost. Not entirely. Your boots squish unpleasantly. Your soul is damp, but you survived. And tomorrow? Tomorrow you'll be back on land, in a place quieter, lonelier, and eerier than any bilge. A place where the dead don't stay quiet. After the bilge shift, you swear nothing on earth could ever smell worse. Nothing could ever feel more claustrophobic, more damp, more unholy. You're wrong, of course. Medieval life is committed to personal character development through suffering, because today you step into the shoes of a graveyard sexton, keeper of the dead, digger of graves, maintainer of burial grounds, and unofficial night watch for all things unsettling. The job isn't glamorous, or clean, or quiet, but it is one of the oldest professions in any medieval town. Someone must care for those who have passed, and today, that someone is you. You arrive at the churchyard just after dawn. Mist coils low across the grass, giving the headstones an ethereal glow. Birds scratch softly at the ground. The church bell tolls in the distance with a slow, hollow note that reverberates through your chest. The old sexton, your temporary supervisor, approaches with a shovel over his shoulder. He looks like he was carved from driftwood and left to cure in the sun for 50 years. "You're late," he says, even though you're not. This is simply how sextons greet people. He hands you a second shovel. The wood is smooth from decades of use. "We've got a fresh grave to dig," he says. "Far corner, near the yew tree. Soil's soft today. Good digging." Soft soil is never a good sign. You follow him to the far end of the churchyard where the grass grows patchy and the shade is perpetual. The yew tree towers above, dark, ancient and looming. Medieval people believed yew trees guarded graveyards, protected souls, trapped wandering spirits or hid them. Historians still argue whether the yew was planted intentionally at burials or if it was simply a tree that tolerated death well. The sexton marks a rectangular shape on the ground with his boot. "Start here." You begin digging. The soil is indeed soft, damp from recent rains and easy to cut through, but that only makes your imagination worse. Your shovel sinks deeply, pulling up clumps of dark earth. Worms wriggle free and dive deeper. Roots twist like fingers. The sexton works beside you, humming a tune that absolutely sounds like something ghosts hum when planning mischief. After a while, you venture a question. "Do you hear things at night?" He pauses, looks at you slowly. "Sometimes," he says, and keeps digging. Excellent. You work in silence, digging until the pit reaches shoulder height, then deeper. You toss shovelful after shovelful of dirt onto the growing mound beside you. Sweat beads on your forehead despite the cool morning air. Your hands ache. Then your shovel hits something solid. You freeze. The sexton leans in. "Root," he says flatly. Mostly. He pulls the root out with his boot and tosses it aside. You exhale. As the grave deepens, shadows creep along its walls. The air grows colder. The churchyard is quiet, so quiet you can hear the distant bleating of sheep on the hillside. Finally the sexton nods. Deep enough, he says. Time to prepare the grounds. He assigns you a list of tasks. Trimming grass around headstones, collecting fallen branches, straightening those markers that have started leaning dangerously, and sweeping the narrow stone path. You begin with the grass. Medieval graveyards weren't manicured. Sheep often grazed them, but upkeep still mattered. You trim around headstones with a small hand scythe. Moss brushes your fingers. Names carved generations ago stare back at you, some legible, some worn to ghost-like smudges. You straighten a crooked stone. As you press it into the soil, wind sighs through the yew branches overhead. The sound carries a chill, a fringe historical tidbit. Graveyard sextons often served as amateur historians. They knew everyone who'd been buried in the last several decades. They remembered scandals, secrets, tragedies. Some kept journals of the dead, not for official records, but because someone had to remember. By midday, the burial procession arrives. A small family, the priest, and a simple wooden coffin. You stand respectfully off to the side as prayers are murmured, tears shed, and the coffin lowered into the grave you dug. The thud of soil striking wood is a sound you never forget. When the family leaves, the sexton pats your shoulder. "Help me finish," he says softly. You shovel earth back into the grave. Slowly, evenly, carefully. It is strangely peaceful, and strangely heavy. Each shovelful is an echo of life closing. When it's filled, the sexton instructs you to mound the top slightly. Soil settles over time, and place a few stones to deter animals. Then comes the part no one tells you about. The night shift. Just before dusk, the priest finds you. "Someone must watch the grounds tonight," he says. "We've had disturbances." You do not like the pause, he added. You return to the churchyard with a lantern, a cloak, and the sense that your bedtime will be emotionally complicated. The sun slips behind the hill. Shadows stretch between the headstones. The yew tree seems larger now, darker, its branches shifting against the sky like reaching arms. The grass, damp with dew, muffles your footsteps. Graveyards at night sound different. Every creak of the church timbers, every owl hoot from the belfry, every rustle of leaves, every sigh of wind. Your lantern flickers. You walk the perimeter. Your breath forms small clouds in the chill. Something scrapes. You spin around. A crow shuffles across a headstone, staring at you with disdain. You exhale, pressing a hand to your chest. You sit on a small stone bench near the yew tree. The night is deep now, ink black, dotted with stars. The lantern glows softly, golden and trembling. If you listen carefully, you hear something soft beneath the wind. A faint hum, a low rhythm. The sexton's song. You realize he must be nearby, perhaps watching from another corner of the grounds. You cannot see him, but hearing the tune comforts you. A connection. A reminder that someone else keeps vigil too. Historians still debate whether graveyard night watches were meant to deter animals, grave robbers, restless townsfolk, or simply superstitious fears. But as you sit here, cloak wrapped tight, boots chilled by the damp earth, you understand why someone must stay. Silence shifts suddenly. A soft thump. You jolt upright. Lantern raised. Nothing moves. No shadows shift. You step carefully toward the sound, boots whispering over grass. You pass headstones with names half swallowed by time. You hold your breath. And then, a hedgehog waddles into your lantern light. You nearly collapse in relief. The hedgehog snuffles once and continues on its heroic journey. You finish the night without further disruptions. When dawn breaks, soft and pink, you stretch stiffly and watch the first rays of sunlight warm the stones. You survived the graveyard, you tended the resting, you witnessed grief, you guarded the silence. And tomorrow? Tomorrow takes you upward, into the bowels of the castle's least glamorous architecture, a place even knights pretend doesn't exist. You return home from the graveyard just after dawn, chilled to the marrow and carrying the faint, haunting echo of the sexton's tune in your head. You barely sleep. You've dug graves, kept vigil through the night, faced more rustling sounds than your nerves deserved, and you tell yourself that today, surely, medieval life must finally give you a break. It does not. Because today, you're climbing into the least glamorous, least celebrated, least discussed part of castle architecture. Today you join the castle latrine maintenance crew. That's right. You're about to become intimately familiar with the royal guard robes. The tall stone shafts built along castle walls where nobles, courtiers and soldiers all dropped the medieval equivalent of inconvenience into a pit far below. If you thought gong farming was bad, you're about to discover its aristocratic cousin. You arrive at the castle just after sunrise. The outer walls rise above you, massive and grey, banners flapping lazily in the morning breeze. A guard escorts you across the courtyard, through an archway, and into a dim corridor that smells faintly of wax, wet stone, and something much less polite wafting from behind a wooden door at the end. "That's your station," the guard says. "Best of luck, truly." He leaves quickly. Too quickly. You push open the door and step into a narrow maintenance chamber that runs along the castle wall. A series of vertical shafts drop downward, each one leading directly to a tiny stone room or opening where waste collects. The shafts are tall, narrow and echoing, like chimneys built for a purpose no one wants to think about. Your supervisor, a wiry man with a permanent frown and an apron that should qualify for combat pay, nods at you. "Grab a paddle. We'll start from Tower 3. A paddle. That's never a good sign. The paddle is a long wooden tool used to break apart solid deposits. You also get a bucket of ash to reduce odour and moisture, a rope bucket for lifting material, and a scraping hook you try not to think too hard about. You follow the supervisor along the maintenance passage until you reach a shaft that smells like it has ambitions of winning an award. He lifts the hatch and gestures. There you go. Fresh work from last night. The smell hits you like a mailed fist. You blink tears from your eyes. You look down the shaft. You instantly wish you hadn't. The waste pile below is exactly what you fear. A slurry of liquid, solid and unidentifiable layers forming a geological record of everything eaten in the past several days by the castle's residents. A swarm of flies buzzes up the shaft to greet you like unwelcome co-workers. A mainstream historical fact, castle garderobes weren't simply holes in the wall. They were long vertical chutes built to protect inhabitants from siege contamination, drafts and invaders climbing upward. Some emptied into pits, others into rivers or moats. But they all required maintenance, or the build-up became catastrophic. Today, catastrophic is your job. You descend a short ladder into the lower chamber where the waste accumulates. The air grows thick, warm, and humid in ways that make your entire body rethink its contract with existence. You step carefully, very carefully, onto a wooden plank placed above the worst of it. Your supervisor hands you the paddle. Break it up, passable chunks only, then we haul. Passable chunks. You sigh. You begin. The paddle sinks in with a sound no human ear should hear. You pry, lift, shift, and break apart layers of, well, medieval cuisine after its second career. The process is physically taxing, emotionally draining, and spiritually confusing. For every 3 strokes, you add ash to keep the stink manageable. The ash forms a thin grey dust that settles like snowfall over a landscape no poet will ever describe. Watch the stones, your supervisor warns. Stones, he gestures toward the sludge. Jewellery, coins, cutlery, people drop things. Your job includes finding them. You stare hard at him. He's serious. Historians still argue whether nobles dropped valuables into garderobes out of carelessness, or because secret disposal was convenient. But archaeological digs have found everything from belt buckles to brooches buried in cesspits. Congratulations. You are now a medieval treasure hunter in a very unfortunate sandbox. You scrape along the sides of the pit and occasionally catch glints of metal. A buckle, a ring, a small carved hairpin. You toss them into a bucket of water for later cleaning. A rat scurries near your foot. You don't scream, but your soul does a little. Hours pass, you paddle, you scrape. You collect lost treasure. You scatter ash. You try not to breathe too deeply. You question every decision that led to this point in your life. The supervisor signals for the next stage, hauling. You fill rope buckets with waste and ash, and workers above hoist them to be carted away for disposal. The shafts echo with shouts, ropes creaking, wood thudding, and flies buzzing so loudly you swear it becomes a kind of cursed music. At one point, something soft and unidentifiable brushes your ankle. You jump so violently you nearly invent modern gymnastics. A fringe historical tidbit. There are records of invaders climbing up garderobe shafts during sieges. Yes, crawling up the chute you're standing in. Fortifications later added iron bars to prevent this. You glance upward, relieved to see the bars firmly in place. The only thing climbing down today is you. and you regret every second. Near midday, a servant rushes into the maintenance passage. "The Lord's expecting company," she hisses. "We need the Great Hall guardrobe cleared immediately," your supervisor groans. "Of course he is." He gestures for you. You're up. The Great Hall guardrobe is spectacularly full. The last feast involved roasted goose, stewed apples, fish pies, plum wine, and several guests whose digestive systems were overconfident. This shaft is wider, deeper, richer in suffering. You begin again. You find half a spoon, a coin stamped with a crest, a shoe buckle, a piece of something that may once have been bread but has now become a philosophical concept. You paddle, shovel and scrape until the space is finally manageable. Then more ash, more hauling, more lifting, more lamenting. By late afternoon, the worst is done. You crawl out of the chamber, covered in a scent so powerful it could be legally classified as a weapon. You wash your boots and hands in a trough outside, but it barely helps. The smell of the shift clings to your clothes, your hair, and possibly your immortal soul. Yet, there is a strange satisfaction in knowing you've prevented a castle-wide sanitation disaster. Without you, the smells from those shafts could rise into noble bedrooms, kitchens, chapels and halls. You preserved comfort, prevented disaster, cleared the very systems that kept medieval castles habitable. You leave the castle grounds exhausted, sore and spiritually dented. The sun is setting. The sky glows gold. The world smells, miraculously, fresh again. You walk home slowly, savouring every clean breath. Because now, at long last, your journey through the worst medieval jobs is complete. Only one thing remains, the soft wind down. A gentle ending after this long, wild, ridiculous, exhausting adventure. Time to rest. Time to drift. Time to close the book on medieval misery.